Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's seminar brought to you by the Institute for African Women in Law Leadership Academy in collaboration with GIZ. Today, we'll be focusing on women in leadership as part of the Women Excellence in Law and Leadership series, and we'll be focusing specifically on women and leadership in corporate law practice. We have here with us a distinguished panel of corporate women lawyers in different African countries who have made a mark and will be sharing with us today their experiences so far in this field of endeavor. My name is Pedi Obani, Dr. Pedi Obani. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Law, University of Bradford, and we have here with us today Ms. Adelaide Benneh Prempeh, who is founder and managing partner of BNP Associates in Ghana. We also have with us Ms. Brenda Mutale Chanda, who is a co-managing partner of Moira Mukaka Legal in Zambia. And with us today as well is Ms. Pamella Ager, who is a managing partner, Oraro and Company. So thank you very much to our distinguished panelists. We're happy to have you here. And thank you also to our audience. We're very happy to have you here with us today. So just to run through what our program will be like, we'll have a brief introduction to the panel and panelists, which we've just gone through. And then we'll have the panelist discussion for about 35 minutes. And after this, we'll open the floor to questions from all of you here with us. But feel free, as the panelists go through the discussions, feel free to enter any questions you have, comments, and we'll pick that up as we go along. And after we've had the questions from all of you, the participants, we'll then have the conclusion where the panelists can just wrap up and give us closing remarks. And with that, we can then say we've come to the end of the discussion. But it promises to be a very exciting session, and we look forward to your participation in full. So like I mentioned at the beginning, women are breaking the glass ceiling, even in the corporate field, spearheading major transactional briefs and taking the lead at the negotiation table in various organizations. This panel therefore brings together leading corporate women law professionals to engage on pertinent issues, including how to move up the corporate ladder, what the practical challenges in the field are, and how to balance personal and professional life, and indeed how to achieve set goals. So with that, I'll move to Brenda. And Brenda, the question I have for you is, you have worked actively in corporate practice for over 15 years, no mean feat. So please tell us, what has been your journey to corporate specialization? Brenda, over to you.
Thank you so much. I've always been commercially inclined. Coincidentally, the first choice for my study was economics. But when I went to campus, I kind of chickened out and decided to do law. So in that sense, I've always been commercially inclined, and choosing to focus on corporate law is a decision that came naturally. But in terms of the practical steps that I needed to take, I think at 5 years at the bar, or is it 3 years, I decided I needed to focus. And the first step I took was to start studying and specialize in areas of practice that were commercially inclined. I enrolled for my master's of law and studied with the University of London, and really I was very deliberate about the choice of courses that I picked. And I wanted a specialization that reflected my interests, and that's what I ended up with. But of course, that's only a first step. And I mean, many people do study, but studying in itself is not an end. I think what is really key, especially for a lawyer, is the practical aspects of your areas. So going forward, the firm I used to be with, deliberately and strategically, decided to join an African network, AB and David Africa. And joining that network really opened a lot of doors for us. And we were able to collaborate with African law firms and international law firms on work. And for me, really, that accelerated my practice because I got exposure to a lot of transactions, cross-border transactions. And in our work, we were able to form transactional teams across the different countries in which AB and David was. And so I knew that if I was dealing with an M&A transaction, I could call upon this person if I needed transactional help. And also working with other firms, other international firms, especially out of London, really helps to build my capacity quickly, because then you're able to leverage on the knowledge and the capacities and even the templates of more experienced lawyers. So really, that was a very strategic decision for our firm. Moving on, what I've continued to do really is to upskill. So occasionally I do enroll for short courses, sometimes with the University of Cape Town, sometimes with platforms like Udemy, and really just sharpen my skills depending on what areas are opening up in any particular moment. Like for instance, now there's a lot of focus on ESG, sustainability. So those are areas you begin to tap in. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go back to school all the time, because again, when you're a partner, you've got a law firm to run. But it just means that you are current and you know what's going on and you're getting the relevant knowledge. I moved on to another firm and teamed up with a partner who has a lot of experience in capital markets, in private equity, and generally in corporate law. So also working as part of that team has really helped to continue sharpening my skills. At some point, I was able to do a secondment in an international law firm. I did it in their South African office. This is a firm with offices across over 40 countries in the world. So that experience also exposed me to how different teams across the country, across different countries can come together and do a transaction, and how to just project manage such transactions. So for me, briefly, really, that has been my journey, but I continue learning and upskilling. And really, learning doesn't need to be formal all the time. It can be informal, And sometimes what helps is work with other firms as well. We've had work referred to from different countries, even African countries. Sometimes you have to do the work jointly. So that really helps to build your experience. So for me, those are some of the practical things that I've been able to do to just sharpen my skills in corporate law practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for sharing that. That's very inspiring. I mean, I like the fact that you started out with economics, but then moved into law. But in a sense, you haven't really left that field. And it's really interesting that you emphasize the need to upskill. And I mean, with COVID and all the online resources we have, that makes it even easier, and I really like the point you made about collaboration and how important it is to collaborate with firms across countries as well, in order to learn how things are done in the corporate field, not just in your own country, but also across other countries as well. Thanks a lot for that again, Brenda.
Correct. Something I never studied economics. It was it's what I wanted to study, but I thought I couldn't manage it.
I see. So you never really started studying it. Okay.
I never did. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Brenda. So with that now, I'll move to Pamella. Pamella, you have experience in banking and finance, as well as conveyancing and real estate practice. So could you please tell us what your journey has been to corporate specialization in this area?
Thank you very much. So my journey in the corporate specialization started in a law firm called Kaplan & Stratton, which is a Tier 1 law firm. In those days, we did pupillage for 2 years. So I did train at Kaplan & Stratton for 2 years, and I proceeded to work there for a couple of years. And then after some introspection, I thought I should grow differently. So I made a move. But I have to say that I enjoyed working with a great team at Kaplan & Stratton, and they have remained my friends. I then moved to Oraro & Company, where I've been for 22 years at Oraro & Company. As you have said, I head the banking, finance, and real estate, which is also part of conveyancing team. And I also am the managing partner. So I have been here for 22 years. But part of my, and I must say before I go on, that I'm very privileged to work with a great team of partners, lawyers, and also good support staff. We also at our company actually are a full affiliate of AB and David Africa, and we actually enjoy working with them. So we collaborate on many issues within the continent and even, overseas in Europe or the US. So that's a great team that we also work with. I also, from the corporate side, sit on a board of a Tier 1 Pan-African institution. And I sit on that institution. I head the board nomination and human resources committee. I also love teaching and training extensively for clients. And so I've taught at the University of Nairobi, which is the university in Kenya. And I teach in the public law department of the School of Law. In my younger years, very interestingly, while I was studying law, I was worked on a part-time basis in an international marketing firm that was led by great women who owned the business as well and who were great role models to me. Just like my sister who has gone before me, I must say that I have continued to train, and in terms of just improving my capacity for clients, I train extensively, and my teaching at the university also has helped me train and just learn different things that, as the legal profession changes. Also, in terms of giving back to the community, I have also sat on the board of a school for the government that tries to support, a large school tries to support underprivileged students who would not otherwise go to school if the government did not pay for them. So that's really what I've done in my corporate journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Pamella. As I was just listening to you, I was smiling and saying, perhaps there's hope for me, even though I'm in academia, to build a career as well. So I'm listening with rapt attention to hear all you have to share. Thanks for that, Pamella. Adelaide, you work as a certified insolvency practitioner and as an insolvency consultant as well. What has your journey been to corporate practice? What has it been like for you?
Thank you, Pedi, and thank you for that kind introduction at the beginning, and nice to meet you all. My journey to corporate specialization has been slightly different from my sisters who have spoken. I qualified in the United Kingdom back in 2001 as a barrister. At that stage, I did my pupillage and then I did internships, and I ended up with a tenancy. I was in two minds at the time as to where I really wanted to be. So I decided to take a role at Hogan Lovells, which is a commercial law firm, an international law firm, in their product liability litigation department. I have to say I enjoyed it thoroughly. It confirmed that I definitely had an interest in commercial practice. But the pull to the bar was too much for me to resist. So then I took tenancy at Gray's Inn Chambers, which is at Chancery Lane in London, and I proceeded to practice at the bar for the ensuing decade. At that time, my practice areas were predominantly family and immigration law. I spent most of my days in court, and a few days I wasn't in court, I was doing paperwork. I enjoyed my work. I had a variety of clients, ranging from parties in divorce proceedings, children and parents who found their children placed in the care system because of inadequate care. I worked with refugees a lot who had fled persecution in their countries, fleeing terrible circumstances. I found the work very practical. I found it very stimulating. I lived for the moments where my clients would tell me that something I did had improved their quality of life, or indeed improved their chances of success in an asylum claim. So I was ticking along and enjoying myself. And after a while, I must admit that that type of work was emotionally intense and emotionally draining. And I started looking around for an alternate area of law, which was equally stimulating. So my journey in corporate specialization coincided with my return back home to Ghana about 10 years ago. When I arrived, I did recall that I enjoyed commercial practice. And in fact, during my time at the English bar, I particularly enjoyed the financial aspects of divorce proceedings. And I did wonder about commercial practice. So when I got back home, I set about finding a good corporate commercial law firm, because I was very keen to see how commercial practice would be for me in practice. I was fortunate. I got a lot of experience. I was exposed very quickly to general corporate law, transactional work, restructuring, energy, petroleum, construction, and the like. My expertise in insolvency has been rather recent, and I'll say that it coincides with COVID. You see, when the COVID pandemic hit, I realized very quickly that it was a global problem. A number of countries were in crisis. A number of companies were in distress, and Ghana was no different. So I started researching, reading widely about this with interest as to what other countries were doing, what sort of COVID reliefs were being put in place, what sort of interim measures, what sort of laws. And at that time, Ghana passed the Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring Act in April 2020, which was timely because I'm sure that our government was also thinking, what can we do about this crisis? So once the law was passed, it was a game changer for us because for the first time in Ghana's insolvency framework history, we had a law that was focusing on business rescue. And there was a lot of political will to make this law work. So IFC was engaged at the time, the International Finance Corporation, to come on board to assist with policy and regulatory technical assistance. And they in turn were looking for a Ghanaian legal consultant, a Ghanaian trained lawyer who was well-versed in Ghanaian corporate law, but also had interest and understanding of the corporate insolvency law. So it was a typical case of preparation meets opportunity for me. Because I had been doing my own studying, reading about it, I excelled in the interviews, I got the role, and I've never looked back. It's been stimulating, it's been fascinating. I particularly like the fact that I'm very much at the cutting edge of history, because now we have businesses with a real option of resuscitation rather than hitherto this law just looking at the dark hole of liquidation or winding up. So in addition to that, I wear several hats. I'm a lecturer at the Ghana School of Law. I teach advocacy and ethics. I currently sit on the board of the Cybersecurity Authority of Ghana, and I also manage a group of energetic and talented lawyers at BNP Associates. Admittedly, you need a lot of physical and intellectual stamina to match up with the demands of our profession, but so far so good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Adelaide. That was very insightful as well. And I think one question I'll come back to all the panelists for is this issue of upskilling, you know, preparation meets opportunity. It seems to be something recurrent in all the answers that you've given. And I think that's something I would like you to touch a bit more upon in the conclusion as well, just as a way of reminding us of how you've done this. In what ways have you done the upskilling? What are the things you looked out for specifically? Because there's so many opportunities out there. And I can imagine, I mean, for me, it's sometimes really daunting the amount of information that's out there. So just knowing where to look, you know, how to channel our search to make the most of these opportunities. So I'll come back to all of you on this, right? But for now, I'll go to Pamella. Pamella, within your particular area of corporate practice, what are some of the common challenges which women have to deal with? Because we know there are probably not so many women in that space. So what are some of the common challenges and how have you gone about addressing these? Pamella.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. So there are several challenges, obviously, that women face in corporate practice. I'll just highlight a few of them. So one of them is what we call the imposter syndrome. And sometimes I laugh because people have been talking a lot about the imposter syndrome of late. I think largely because maybe Michelle Obama talked about it recently. But this syndrome has been there from time immemorial. And in fact, some famous psychologists did write a lot about it in the 70s. So what women typically do, if you look at the corporate space in the legal profession, obviously it's dominated by men, especially when you become more senior, but there are many women who do well in Kenya and I'm sure in the other African countries and indeed globally. But sometimes you meet women who self-sabotage and they doubt their abilities and their competence, even though they're very qualified and experienced, obviously, to do the jobs that they do. And surprisingly, contrary to what most people think, these are very high achieving women in practice. It's not for mediocre people at all. And they doubt their accomplishments, their accolades, and some of them actually sometimes think, am I hired because it was a token appointment, or do I really deserve to be here? And they self-sabotage and doubt themselves. So obviously what we tell women is that, if you're there, you are qualified, you did go through a proper process, and you are qualified to take that position. I am privileged to work at a run company where, honestly, we really don't think of women as token appointments. We have women here and they compete just like men. I do recognize that that's not the position everywhere though, and that's why I tell women, with regard to the imposter syndrome, you must not sabotage yourself. You must sit at the table, lean in, and don't be afraid to take your space. That's what I tell women. Now, another issue that women struggle with, and I discuss this often with a lot of women in this corporate space, and even in my office, is the work-life balance issue. And the issue is always, what does work-life balance really mean? What I prefer to call it is really work-life integration, because I don't think it can be either or. Okay, and I do recognize that the demands of the profession are high and enormous, and the modern client demands a lot from us. We must deliver. Should they demand a lot from us? Of course they do. They are paying premium for the services, and the turnaround time must be exceptional. And so we tell women that really we just need to obviously integrate our work life into our family lives, and vice versa. There's no shortcut. So, how we can integrate and do both and not that. So that's a struggle that many women have. When I talk to many women, who are mothers, who have partners, who have spouses, who have aging parents, most of them, in their private moments, if they're close enough to you, will tell you that they struggle with guilt. Am I a good enough mother? Am I a good spouse? Am I a good wife? Am I supporting my family? I may have made it in the corporate space. Will my children do that? We struggle with those things. But, if we continuously support gone before us, like role models, like mentors, like sponsors, like proper coaches, who can challenge us and, sometimes in a ruthless way, then I think we can succeed. Another challenge that I think women struggle with, maybe I'll just highlight 4 so that the other ladies can also contribute, is stopping before they have to stop. So you have a typical woman in corporate space doing very well, but she sits down and says, maybe I want to be a mother. And so she says, not everybody wants to be a mother, that's fine. But she says, maybe I want to be a mother, maybe I have aging parents, maybe I have a child who's not well. And they say, why bother? If I'm going to have a baby, 2 or 3 babies, I can't compete with the men. But what I tell women is it's a season. I had a friend who was a doctor once and went for an interview when she was heavily pregnant. And she said, hey, this child is going to be out of here in a couple, in several months. It's not a permanent thing. So I encourage women to say, it's a season, embrace it. Don't self-sabotage. Work when you can and don't stop until you have to stop. So when you're pregnant, if your health is good, work. When you have aging parents, if you have a good employer and you're a hardworking person, the employer will understand. So don't stop and give up before you have to. And maybe the last one I can highlight in the interest of time is just accommodating stereotypes and bias and generalization. So sometimes you find women, again, I say self-sabotaging by accommodating cultural mindsets and organizational structures and saying, people have told you this over and over. And so you believe that you can't, because the organization perhaps thinks that you cannot go overseas for some training, or you cannot go overseas to represent the firm, because can you do that if you're a woman? Can you do that if you're a mother? Maybe, maybe not. Of course, I believe you can, but obviously you must be there to support that. And also cultural mindsets. I know that's a big thing in Africa, maybe globally. So women sometimes allow those things that people say. You are not a good mother because you're a senior corporate lawyer or things like that. You ignore your children. And those things obviously affect your career growth in the corporate space. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Pamela. You know, it is interesting listening to you because I think this resonates with so many women, you know, in the legal profession, but even outside the legal profession as well. And I saw Adelaide smiling and I saw Brenda smiling in a very telling way. So I'll come back to both Adelaide and Brenda to see if they would want to weigh in on that question as well. But in the meantime, before I come to you, Adelaide, I just want to say to our audience, please do come with your questions, comments, feedback. Thank you very much for all the conversations going on, the introductions in the chat box, really well appreciated. But if you've got any questions for our panelists, please do feel free to type in the questions and then we'll come to the questions as we go along. So back to you, Adelaide, the challenges which women face, because I know insolvency is also one of those areas where you don't find so many women. So tell us what it's been like.
When I think of challenges, there are many, but let me limit myself to really, I think a number of things that Pamela said resonates with us. That's why we're smiling as she went on. What comes to mind? I think I'll limit myself to two. The first that comes to mind is prejudice and preconceptions. You know, sometimes you are faced in this business with people assuming what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. I don't know whether it's a cultural thing, but I think that generally that's what happens. So the prejudice that a woman faces sometimes as to her reliability not being consistent because she wears another hat in her family. She's a mother, she's a child, so she can't hack it consistently. And sometimes you fall into that dangerous space where you think that you need to do over and above. You need to work all God-given hours, antisocial hours, just to prove yourself. Sometimes it's not even urgent or as important, but you just keep going. And that can be very dangerous because in terrible circumstances, you can end up burning out or breaking down. And sometimes those sort of clients are not even worth it anyway. So in time, you find a way of parting company amicably with clients who are not aligned to your type of service delivery. The second thing I would say in terms of it being a challenge is that as women, sometimes we find ourselves as always on stage. And I'll explain what I mean. You can't have a bad day. If you make a mistake once or twice, people start looking at you like, oh, well, she can't handle it. She's a woman anyway. Whereas, for example, if your male counterpart makes a mistake, he may be excused as having a bad day. He's very good, but he just had a bad day. And that sometimes drives women to set impossible tasks for ourselves. We need to be perfect at work, perfect at home, and succeeding in neither. So I would say that we should be aware of that and be confident within ourselves when we have a handle on the subject at hand or when we're knowledgeable about what we're doing. We shouldn't doubt ourselves, but we should realize the sort of environment we operate in and make sure that we are consistent. It comes with self-discipline, it comes with reading, it comes with knowledge and making sure that you are that confident woman out there and setting a good example for other women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Adelaide. Brenda?
Well, everything that everyone has said really resonates with me. Maybe I'll pick on two areas. I think the other challenge for women really, which is as a result of maybe traditional norms, prejudices against women, is access to transactions in the corporate space. So typically you find that men feel comfortable giving work to fellow men. And that may be as a result of prejudice, not necessarily that women are not qualified to handle certain types of work, but I think it also speaks to our social circles. So typically men hang out in these social circles. They'll be at the golf club, they'll be at the hotel, bar, drinking together and giving each other deals. If a woman becomes part of that company, there's a certain prejudice, she'll be perceived in a certain way, unfortunately. That said, I think for women, it's really about adopting a strategy that works for you in terms of how you get work, so you have to show that you're qualified to do the work that you're asking people to give you. And sometimes that's why it is said that women have to prove themselves so many times over, you know, to just be able to show that they are qualified. Of course, there's been some slight change over the years. And I mean, I have a lot of male clients who feel confident giving work to me, but the reality is men take the lead in this particular area of law. The other thing I want to agree with the other panelists is really this thing of self-sabotage. So for me, typically, I think I've succeeded in whatever I've put my mind to, be it school, be it setting up a law firm, be it in partnership with someone else. But, you know, there is always that lingering doubt as to whether you are good enough. But I think for me, how to overcome it practically is really just to put yourself out there. So before, if I'm invited to a webinar like this, I would rather say, I can't be part of this, you know, because I'm not sure what value I'll bring to it. But these days, I really just dive in, you know, and that's the only way. You may not be very good at the beginning, but you keep sharpening your skills as you go along. The other thing for me really is this work-life balance. And for me, it came very early in my life because I think I had all my 3 children before 30. You know, I was an associate then, and you know, everyone dumps work on you. And I really just want to agree with Pamella that you don't stop. And, you know, my children are not very well spaced. So I really had 3 babies in the home at one time. It was very hectic, but like Pamella, I decided to keep, like Pamella said, I didn't stop. I decided to keep pushing. I'll be honest, I had to take a break, but I was very clear that it was a break. I wasn't stopping. I think, it was intended to be a 1-year break. It ended up being a 4-month break because an opportunity came by and I had to embrace that opportunity. I've been able, I'm a mother to 3 teenage children, but I've been able to do everything that I've done this far in the midst of raising my children. And now they're teenagers, they're in their own space, and I've just kept on carrying on. So for me, those are some of the challenges, but I think we need to continuously keep overcoming these challenges if we are going to.
Thank you so much for that, Brenda. I mean, before you go, Brenda, I want to ask you, considering your position in your firm, you know, as a co-partner, what are the strategies that you can share with women who are aspiring to corporate leadership as well?
Like we've pointed out, you continuously have to improve yourself because corporate leadership and doing corporate law really means delivering to high-end clients. You know, you have to understand your clientele. These are busy people. These are people who want quick solutions, quick but tangible solutions, and solutions that can be supported. So upskilling and training is inevitable. You continuously have to do that. As a partner in the firm, you really need to also be willing to make the financial sacrifices and investments that improves your delivery to clients. So it's not enough anymore to just be that ordinary firm, you know, that does things in a traditional way. Clients want more. You should be willing to invest in client care systems. You need to be willing to invest in resources, databases that give you access to good precedents that you can adopt. You need to be willing to invest in a corporate setup that represents who you are saying you are. So for me, those sacrifices have to be made. You need to be willing to put in a lot of hours to learn a new practice area, to be current with what is going on. You know, you have to be aware of what is going on in the economy, what is going on in different sectors of the economy, so that you can tap into those opportunities. So that would really be my advice to anyone who's aspiring to come into the corporate space.
Thank you so much for that, Brenda. I'll move to Adelaide to ask you the same question. I mean, something Brenda touched upon, how she's managed to balance private and personal private personal life as well as her public professional life. So I'll come to you, Adelaide, with that question. But before I do that, I just want to say to our participants that we have a survey. There's a link to a survey in the chat box. Would really appreciate your feedback, you know, in order to assist us with improving programming for the future Institute for African Women in Law webinars and trainings as well. So please take out a few minutes to just fill the survey. So back to you, Adelaide. How have you managed, you know, I mean, Brenda has said it's not so much about balance, it's more about integration. So how have you approached this and what has worked for you?
Well, Pedi, I would say that the work-life balance is a work in progress. I don't think I've arrived at all. I'm a mother of 3 children, and every day is a different adventure. But I do have a number of approaches, I would say, that I normally rely on, which gets me day by day. The first, I'll say, is a support network. You see, my family is clearly as important to me as my career, and interweaving those 2 strands are not always easy. But one thing I'm clear on is that my personal ability has never been enough to ensure a work-life balance for family or indeed my career. I would say that a supportive partner, a supportive community that believes in your ambitions and supports your ambitions has been very helpful. Because what happens then is that you're always working towards common goals in every set of circumstances that you find yourself. For me personally, having a supportive partner has been helpful because we're able to work out practical solutions to problems that arise. Having said that, sometimes you feel like you're just muddling through, even with the most dedicated of nannies. There are anxieties when the children are ill, it's unscripted, and clearly you don't want to leave it to a nanny. But I would say that a supportive network is everything for me. A supportive partner, a supportive family, and a handful of loyal friends. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is that you need to prioritize your time. I'll call it priority management. It's very important that when you have shortness of time, you are able to prioritize as to what is important and what is urgent. You need to have the discipline to do that, because then you will end up spending that precious bit of time draining that out with menial tasks and tasks that you think are easier to just get over and done with. You always have to ask yourself, and I do that continuously. I ask myself, what can I be doing at this moment, which is important and urgent for this limited time that I have? Can I delegate some of these tasks? And if you do that, I would suggest that you write a list. I'm big on lists. I'm a firm believer that if you don't write it down, you will not achieve it. So I write a list, I go over my list, I take out important and urgent, I deal with it that way till I work my way down. And another thing about delegating is that you also invest in other people. Sometimes you think for efficiency reasons, you rather just get it over and done with by yourself. But in the long term, that can't be good for you or indeed your firm, because you then invest that time in somebody who's probably not qualified for that task, but in the long term is more efficient and makes you a more effective leader. A final point I'll touch on is that we must learn to say no sometimes. We must learn to say no. And I know that it's quite difficult sometimes. Learn to say no to sometimes speaking engagements, presentations, or another deal, if that is the case. And sometimes it helps with your sense of perspective and resolution to say no when you realize that no one is irreplaceable, no one is indispensable. The show will go on, sometimes regardless of your response. And once you realize that, it's easier to say no. So sure, sometimes it's not easy to say an outright no. You struggle with that. Find an alternative that will allow you to arrive at the same decision. So for example, you say, thank you so much for this opportunity, but I'm so overcommitted right now that I fear I will not do it justice if I take it on. Now that's a nice no, but it's still a no. Sometimes and I think this comes with experience. In deciding to take on opportunities, you have to be very careful to do your research. Don't just be flattered because somebody's invited you to come and speak. Don't just be flattered because somebody has said, come and get an award in Dubai or wherever. You need to do your research to see where these invitations are coming from. Are these credible institutions? Are they just using your goodwill to basically establish themselves? And once you say that, no, it's not that difficult. And then you score some brownie points, perhaps with your son who's been waiting for you to take him to the beach for a long time and you've been putting it off because your weekend is free and you can have some fun. So that's how I have worked with my work-life journey.
Thank you very much for that, Adelaide. That's really interesting. Work-life journey. Interesting. Pamella, I've seen you nodding. Would you want to say something very briefly before we then go on to the questions from the audience?
Thank you very much. I was happy when Adelaide said no you have to be able to say no, because in preparing for this, I actually had no is also a sentence. So NO full stop. Sometimes you just have to say no. But I just want to add maybe 2 points, obviously in the interest of time, that I found that have worked for me. One is embracing technology. Technology has changed the world immensely. And I know if I talk to maybe my daughter who's much, much younger, she's always like, why do you have to do right things in space? There's technique that can make even your work as a lawyer significantly easier if you apply project management skills where you understand the techniques and agree on how you will do things in terms of time and basically understand how repetitive work can be done easily. And also very important, Adelaide did say, it's okay to delegate, obviously not abdicate, but sometimes you need to say, and that is something I've struggled with over the years, I don't have to say that I have to do it because I'll just get it over and done with quickly. I have a young lovely lady who works for me, Anna, and I have to say, I have to give it to Anna. And even if it's wrong, we have to repeat it until she gets it, because otherwise it's selfish. And another thing I'd like to say also is just prioritize self-care. That's something I've struggled with. I once saw somebody say, just talk to somebody. And I went and they said, self-care, your mental health, your physical health. And, you know, I said mental health, physical health, whatever that is, you know, but you have to prioritize it. And I've seen that, you know, just taking, sometimes I tell my family, Sunday afternoon, I don't want to talk to anybody. It's my only afternoon before Monday. And I just exhale. And I'm a better person in the evening or the following Monday for my family and my colleagues. I did like also the issue of the support network. Very, very fantastic. And one thing I just want to share before you go, she talked about her son in the beach. You know, our support system is great. If you don't sometimes explain to them what you have to do in the corporate space, they might not be able to support you. I remember, and as an example, just to encourage the ladies listening, my daughter once told me in primary that, Mommy, so-and-so's mother is the best mother in the school. And I said, why? She said, she's always bringing cakes and cookies and all those things. And I sat down and I said, how am I going to do this? And I told her, look, I cannot bake cakes. I cannot bring cookies during the week, but I will come for every parents teachers meeting and every recital that you have. And to my surprise, she understood. So the support system is great if we let them know how we want to be supported. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Pamella. I think that really underscores a very important point, communication. We need to be able to communicate to the support system what we need, what we can offer. And then we also need to be able to communicate to everyone who approaches us for our professional services as well, to say, this is what we can do and this is how we can do it in order to be able to give the best of ourselves. So thanks a lot for that, Pamella. I'd like to move to the Q&A section. We've got a few questions here for our distinguished panelists. I mean, some of the questions are around mentorship, and I'm happy to announce that the Institute for African Women in Law does have a network in place for various professionals, but also students and early careers. So if you go through the website, we've got a newly launched website, which is very beautiful and has, you know, all the information very accessible at the moment. So you would really enjoy going through it. But we've got an expert network. We've also got an early career network, and we've got a student network. So I would invite everyone who isn't yet part of the network to please sign up and join this beautiful space that we have and platform, where we can connect with experts, but we can also connect with people at our own level, early careers, students, and get the resources that we need, because there's a lot of resources out there. So please engage with the website and with the different networks that we've got available. We've got a question here which I'd like to read out to the panelists. And it's about this idea of stereotypes, narratives around women and professionals. So how does one change the narrative that women have to be superwomen, in quotes, in order to succeed? And how do we change the narrative so that women who excel are not survival of the fittest, so to speak? So how do we, in other words, normalize success for women without putting too much pressure on the women themselves? In the interest of time, I don't know if there's one panelist who wants to speak to this, or would you want me to call someone? Adelaide?
Sure. It's a very big question, but I will do my best to at least provide some thoughts on that. I think that the stereotypes, the stereotypical images of women have existed for several years. But my take on it is that you have to brighten your corner where you are. You have to make sure that when you get to the top, or you are close to the top, you definitely strive to have a better version of yourself. That is not to pretend that you're not a mother of 3 and you're not running around like a headless chicken every morning, trying to put the world to right. But it's to make sure that in spite of this, and in addition to it, you are doing these things. So you give people a better but a genuine version of yourself, so that they don't feel the pressure of constantly having it all perfectly, because it's not possible. Life is not like that. We achieve in segments, especially as women. Let go of those external markets where you feel that you should be a certain way, and X arrived at this point in year 1, so I should also, each to their own journey. Inevitably, as women, should I say, our careers hit peaks and troughs. We naturally take gaps in our career journey for childbirth, for maternity, or indeed for some other family-related issue. That's fine. Don't be too hard on yourself. Celebrate your successes in the round, and always ask yourself, what is important for me right now in my journey? Is it my childcare, or is it striving to reach the top, neglecting my family? You really need to make that decision for yourself, because once you do that, even if in the final analysis you don't make partner to a law firm, you can be satisfied within yourself that you're a pretty fantastic lawyer, but with a solid work-life balance as well. And I think that's where sometimes we go off track, when we start comparing ourselves, or we have a misconceived idea of what perfection or indeed success is. Be yourself, take steps gently, achieve in segments, and let go of external markers or external stereotypes of what a successful woman looks like.
Thank you so much for that, Adelaide. I'll come to Brenda. Brenda, you spoke a lot about upskilling. I mean, the other panelists also mentioned this, but there's a specific question for you from our audience. And the question is, what's a typical day in your life? And how do you make time to upskill yourself and take all these courses which you've mentioned? So over to you, Brenda.
So, I mean, a typical day for me is really a combination of a lot of things. It's me looking at my emails. It's me giving instructions to associates. It's me meeting up with a client, whether physically or virtually. It's me having partner meetings. It's me having staff meetings. It's me sitting down to learn about a new offering for maybe some legal technology, maybe a practice management software. It's all these things, so it can be a lot. And I'm not even saying that I train every day. So sometimes I'll pay for a course and say, I'll dedicate an hour or 2 to listen to the recordings. You know, I'll sign up. I mean, usually I'll go through a schedule of courses that a certain university is offering. These may be 1-day courses or 2-day courses, and maybe for 2 hours on each day. And I'll sign up maybe in every quarter. So it's really just been very structured and slotting these things into your calendar, but not really overwhelming yourself to a point where you begin to burn out. So yeah, that's the balance. And sometimes it's really, you know, defining what is important and what is urgent and attending to that at a given time. Sometimes I'm very clear about what instructions I will take and what instructions I can't take. You know, sometimes the reason is that the client simply won't pay. So I don't want to invest 3 months of time in a transaction where I know that a client may not have the capacity to pay, or it's a project that is not really well thought through. And maybe the people are not even sure what they are trying to achieve themselves. And there are just certain areas of law or of practice that I've said, I will not do this anymore. So it's really trying to achieve a balance by making those decisions.
Thank you so much for that, Brenda. We have a question in the chat box. It's about the efforts being made to empower young women in law. So the question is, what efforts have you made to empower young women in law that aspire to reach the professional heights that you have reached? So before I hand over to our panelists, anyone who wants to speak to this question, I also want to say a big thank you to the panelists, because by being part of today's webinar and contributing to these kinds of efforts, they are also making an impact, you know, in the lives of young women lawyers across the continent and indeed in various parts of the world. So thanks to our panelists. And if you have any other initiatives that you're involved with that are specifically addressing the empowerment of young women in law, please do feel free to share with our audience, because they're keen to know more and to keep following you. So I'll say again to the audience, please keep following the Institute for African Women in Law, because this is essentially what we're about here. So with that, does Pamela want to say something? Okay.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Pamela. So with that, I'll move to the next question, and it is about assessing personal assumptions or obstacles and how this can help with work-life balance. I'm hoping this is something that has been addressed by our 3 panelists in speaking to the different questions, but if any panelist wants to add more to this idea of work-life balance, please feel free to let me know, and I'll come over to you. Otherwise, there's a question here which I think all our panelists should weigh in on, and it is, what is one thing you know now about yourself that you wish you had known earlier in your career? So let's start with Adelaide, and then Pamela, and then Brenda. So Adelaide, what is the one thing you know about yourself now that you wish you had known earlier in your career?
Thank you, Pedi. Very important question. So I suppose that when I started my career, I was very much focused on technical ability, technical excellence, striving to achieve technical excellence. And I had a picture as to how my legal career should go. But in time, I found that it was very important to stay open, very important to embrace opportunities, very important to educate yourself and not be in a pigeonhole of a particular field, a particular area. I mean, there's no substitute for doing it and feeling it. It's very important that you avail yourself of as many opportunities as possible, even if you're not that way inclined, because you never know where your decision or your experience will take you. So I do wish, with the benefit of hindsight, I was very open-minded at the very beginning to explore as many opportunities as possible before I settled down.
Thank you very much for that, Adelaide.
Okay, so like Adelaide, in my earlier career, all I focused on was technical skills. How do I become the best lawyer that I can be? But interacting with my male colleagues and several senior women has taught me that really you need the importance of networking and leveraging your relationships. So just for the young ladies, yes, your technical capacity is very, very important and you must be excellent at that. But you have to be able to network. That's how the business comes, just like our male colleagues do it. And you have to leverage your relationships. And that includes your male and female relationships to grow your career. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pamella. Brenda?
I think for me, it's networking, just to agree with Pamella. I think early in my career, I used to think networking was exaggerated because everyone would talk about network, your networking is your net worth, and I would really think, okay, I think that's an exaggeration. But I think it's something that has really worked well. And networking really is about building relationships and earning trust. So it doesn't mean that you meet someone at some event and you click and the next day they are giving you work. And some relationships will simply not work, but others work as long as you keep knocking and investing. And the fact that somebody says no the first time doesn't mean that it will forever be a no. It may be that at that particular time, they simply don't have an opportunity for you, or they haven't yet earned your trust. So networking, investing in relationships, being open and continuously learning for me has really proven to be the thing that has, given me a lot of exposure and opportunities. The other thing that I've learned is to say no, because again, as a lawyer, you can only do so much. And I heard somebody say there's a lawyer for every person. Sometimes we feel like when someone comes to us with whatever problem, we have to sort it out. It doesn't, you can politely say no and be able to refer someone. You're not going to hurt the relationship. You're simply saying, I don't focus on this kind of work, or this is not something that I have the expertise to do, because you also want to focus on a particular area. So saying no is something that I've learned, but it has to be said properly, it has to be said politely, and it shouldn't hurt the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brenda. I'm really very excited about the conversation we've had today, and I've learned a lot myself. I believe the audience has also learned a lot. We've got just about 2 minutes left. In the 2 minutes, I want to say two things. One, I want to say that the next webinar comes up on the 28th of April, and it's focused on moving up and becoming a partner. So I would invite all of us to please sign up and come back again for another exciting session, an inspiring one as well. And then the second thing I want to say is back to our panelists, and this will be our last question. It's one that was put in the chat box, but didn't come through the Q&A session, so I'll just read it out. But it's about the strategies or any tips which you could share in order for people to be able to get work or clients. So from your wealth of experience, what are your top strategies for getting more clients? Adelaide?
I'll say soft skills. Soft skills has been touched upon in networking and so on. You see, we normally focus on technical ability. In fact, at a certain level, technical ability is a given. But women must realize that we are good at this profession because we come with a set of skills more commonly found in women. For example, we're very good at communicating. We can communicate, we're very good at listening. We listen to what's being said and what's not being said. So we have a head start when it comes to these sort of soft skills. We should not shy away from our femininity. We should basically capitalize on it and make sure that we're putting to good use what comes to us naturally. I'm a firm believer that you don't have to deny your womanhood to be successful. So what you've got, use it to your advantage. Soft skills. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adelaide. Pamella?
Yes, just one point in the interest of time is being authentic. Clients want people who are in my training of the soft skills over and over. I have been told that my client must recognize that I know them so well that I actually care about them as a person beyond their business. So just being authentic so that people appreciate you as a person and know that you have the empathy and support that you can give them technically and as individuals or corporate.
Thank you so much, Pamella. Brenda?
I do agree with what Pamella and Adelaide have said, but really to just add that yes, like Adelaide has said, it's technical skills at a certain stage are given. It's also value add, to your clients, those kinds of services that you are not necessarily billing for, but they give you an advantage. Things like training and just thought leadership, and thought leadership doesn't mean you're pushing anything to your clients. It may not be relevant to them. It's caring about what is relevant to them, what will help their business, what they need to be aware of in terms of the law, in terms of regulation, and just in terms of the new trends around, the law that affects the sectors that they're operating in. So value add, I think a lot of clients are asking for that. And as lawyers, we must be willing to give more, over and above our technical skills.
Thank you so much for that, Brenda. Thank you to our distinguished panelists. Thank you to our audience for your time and your patience. And with that, I think we've come to the end of today's session, and we look forward to meeting you again on the 28th of April. And in the meantime, we wish our panelists every success in your careers, and for the rest of us as well, every success in all that we do. Thank you, and have a nice rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.